You get to a certain age, let's say north of 40, and you figure you've got the world mostly figured out. You've paid your taxes, buried a parent or two, and you know the difference between a real threat and the boogeyman stories you tell your kids. The world gets smaller, more rational. The shadows are just shadows. That's what I thought anyway. Before Leo died. Before I went back to the falls, Leo was my best friend. Not in the way guys say it now, throwing the term around for anyone they grab a beer with. I mean, we were forged in the same dirt, bled on the same rocks. For 40 years. From Tonka trucks to his firstborn, he was the only constant. He died how a lot of men in the Blue Ridge die. Too fast, too young, and in a way that makes no damn sense. A brain aneurysm. One minute he was laughing on the phone with me about his faulty carburetor. The next, he was gone. The funeral was a blur of black suits, casseroles I couldn't eat, and the hollow look in his wife's eyes. But the real grief, the gut punch, it didn't hit me until about 3 weeks later. The silence was the worst part. The phone not ringing. The world just kept spinning, and it felt like a profound betrayal. I needed to go somewhere that was ours. And for us, that was always Devil's Basin Falls. It's not on any official park map. You have to know the old logging trail off Route 220, the one that's been swallowed by kudzu and poison ivy. It's a hard hike, a real bastard on the knees, which is why we loved it as kids. It was our fortress. We'd spend whole summers down there, daring each other to jump from the highest ledge, talking about the girls we'd marry and the lives we'd lead. We made a pact there once, when we were 12, pricking our fingers with a rusty fish hook. Brothers to the bone, we swore. No matter what. It was a hot, humid Tuesday when I drove out there. The air was thick as soup. I left my truck by the rusted gate and started the walk, the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves filling my lungs. It was all so familiar it ached. I could almost hear the echo of our laughter, see the ghosts of two scrawny kids running ahead of me. Down in the basin, the waterfall roared just like it always had, a constant, powerful churn of white water crashing into the deep, dark pool below. I sat on the same flat rock we'd claimed as our throne, letting the cool spray mist my face. For the first time since Leo died, a piece of the crushing weight on my chest seemed to lift. I was just sitting there, lost in thought, skipping a few flat stones across the water's surface when the woods went silent. It's a sound that any hunter or outdoorsman knows and dreads. It's not an absence of noise, it's a presence of silence. The cicadas stopped their buzzing. The birds went quiet. The squirrels stopped chattering. It was like someone had thrown a thick, heavy blanket over the entire forest. The only sound left was the waterfall, and without the life around it, it suddenly sounded less like nature and more like static. My hand froze mid-throw. Every instinct I had, honed from decades of tracking deer through these same woods, screamed at me. You are not alone, and you are being watched. Then I heard it. A single, heavy snap. Not a twig. This was a branch, thick as my arm, broken clean in two. It came from the ridge above the falls, maybe 50 yards out. Too heavy for a buck. Way too clumsy for a bear. Bears move like shadows when they want to. This was deliberate. Heavy. I slid off the rock, moving slow and low, and tucked myself into a thicket of rhododendron near the water's edge. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drum against the bass beat of the falls. I peered through the waxy green leaves, my eyes scanning the dense tree line. That's when I heard the footsteps. Thump drag. Thump drag. It was a bipedal gait, but it was wrong. The rhythm was off, a heavy footfall followed by what sounded like something being dragged through the leaf litter. It was getting closer. The smell hit me. Next, it was foul, a thick, coppery scent of old blood and wet, musky fur, like a slaughterhouse left open in the summer heat. I held my breath, my mouth dry as dust. The thumping grew louder, closer, until I saw movement. Through the trees, A silhouette broke through the foliage and stepped into the clearing on the opposite side of the basin. The stories people told, the campfire tales about the Blue Ridge demon, they were all bullshit, I'd thought. Drunkards' fantasies. But the thing standing there, it was like it had walked straight out of those whispers. It was tall, a good 7 feet, maybe more. Its frame was all wrong, too long in the limbs, with a gaunt, skeletal torso. Its skin, or hide, wasn't fur, wasn't flesh, but looked like scarred, tanned leather, stretched tight over bone. Its hands were huge, with long, gnarled fingers that ended in what looked like yellowed talons. But the head, that was the worst part. It was long, almost equine, but its features were a horrifying mockery of a man's. And from its brow, 2 small, black nubs of bone protruded like the horns of a goat, but filed down or broken off. It stood there, its head twitching from side to side, sniffing the air. Its movements were jerky, unnatural, like a marionette with a drunk puppeteer. It took another step, dragging one of its legs behind it. I saw then that the leg was bent at an impossible angle, the bone clearly shattered and healed all wrong. Old Man Hemlock. The town. Crazy. He was the only one who ever claimed to have survived an encounter. He'd said he'd shot it with a deer rifle, shattered its leg before it dragged him half a mile. Everyone said he'd been drunk and fell in a ditch. Looking at that mangled limb, a cold dread washed over me. He wasn't crazy. The creature lowered its head to the pool and drank, its long, gray tongue lapping at the water. I was pinned, trapped. My only way out was back up the steep embankment behind me. For what felt like an eternity, I stayed perfectly still, my muscles screaming in protest. It finished drinking, raised its head, and for a terrifying moment, its dark, hollow-looking eyes seemed to stare directly at my hiding spot. I swear to God, it knew I was there. It was toying with me. Then, it let out a low growl. It wasn't a sound of aggression. It was different. It sounded like a recording of a growl, played through a cheap, broken speaker. It was a flat, dead imitation of a sound. It turned and, with that same hideous thump-drag gait, it limped back into the forest and disappeared. I didn't move for 20 minutes. I counted every second. When I finally found the courage to crawl out of the bush, my legs were shaking so violently I could barely stand. The stories weren't just about sightings. They were about people who went hiking or camping and just vanished. Gone. I knew I couldn't run. Panic is loud. A snapped branch, a loose rock, it would hear. So I started walking, placing each foot with the care of a man walking through a minefield. I moved away from the falls, choosing a longer, harder route up a steep clay bank, hoping to put as much distance between us as possible. I was about halfway up, using roots and saplings as handholds, when it happened. I reached up and grabbed a thick branch to pull myself over a ledge. The wood felt solid in my hand, but it was dead, rotten to the core. With a sickening crack, it tore free. I tumbled backwards, sliding and rolling down the bank, rocks and dirt scraping me raw. I landed in a heap at the bottom, my ankle twisting. Beneath me with a sharp, white-hot flash of pain. And from the woods, not 30 yards away, I heard it again. That broken, recorded-sounding growl. Then the footsteps. But they were faster now. Thump, 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 thump. It wasn't dragging its leg anymore. It was running. It had been faking the limp. It was a predator, luring me into a false sense of security, waiting for me to make a mistake. Sheer, animal terror took over. There was no thought, no reason, just the primal need to live. I forgot my screaming ankle. I dug my fingers into the soft clay of the bank and scrambled up like a madman, dirt under my nails, terror giving me a strength I didn't know I had. I reached the top and I ran. I ran like I hadn't run since I was a boy. I crashed through briars that tore at my clothes and skin. I vaulted over fallen logs. I didn't look back. I could hear it behind me, crashing through the undergrowth, its unnaturally heavy footfalls keeping pace. I could hear its breathing, a dry, rasping sound like sandpaper on bone. A voice, thin and reedy, echoed through the trees behind me. "Jack, wait up." I froze. My blood turned to ice. It was a weak, thin imitation, but it was Leo's voice. The way he used to call for me when we were kids, when I'd outrun him on the way to the falls. That's what broke me. It wasn't just a monster. It was a devil, a thing that takes what it kills and uses it for bait. I screamed then, a raw, ragged sound of pure horror, and pushed myself harder, the branches whipping my face, my lungs burning like they were full of acid. My property backs up to the state forest. My house is the last bastion of civilization for miles. As I burst through the final line of trees and into the clearing of my own backyard, I didn't slow down. I ran across the manicured lawn, a stark contrast to the wild chaos I had just escaped. I fumbled with the back door, my keys scratching uselessly at the lock, my hands shaking too much. I could feel its eyes on me from the tree lean. I finally got the key in, stumbled inside, and slammed the deadbolt. Home. My 2 German shepherds were going absolutely ballistic, throwing themselves against the glass of the patio door, their barking a frantic, furious roar. I leaned against the door, gasping for air, my whole body trembling. After a minute, I forced myself to look. I crept to the window and peered out past the dogs. There it was. It stood just inside the shadows of the woods, at the edge of my lawn, partially hidden behind an old oak tree. It was perfectly still, just a tall, wrong silhouette in the dying light. It was watching the house, watching me. How long had it been there? Had it followed me the whole way? Or had it just been waiting? I stayed there, watching it, for what must have been an hour, until full dark had fallen. My dogs never stopped barking. Then, as if it had made a decision, it took one step back, melting into the blackness of the woods, and it was gone. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. I bought new locks, installed floodlights that would turn my yard into a landing strip. But it feels useless. Here's the part one haven't told anyone. The part that keeps me awake. The morning after it happened, I went out onto my back porch. The dogs were still whining, their noses pressed to the glass. And there, on the wooden railing of the porch, sitting right in the middle, was a single, flat, gray stone. It was a skipping stone, the exact kind Leo and I used to search for along the banks of the falls, worn perfectly smooth by the water. It wasn't a random monster I saw in the woods. It's a collector. It collects people, and it collects their memories. It took Leo, I know it did. And when it called my name in his voice, it wasn't just a mimic. It was an echo from my best friend, trapped inside that thing. It knows my name. It knows my home. And it knows the one thing in this world that could lure me back into those woods. It's no longer a question of if it will come back. It's a question of when. Every night, I sit by the window with my father's old Remington 870 across my lap, and I watch the tree lean. I watch and I wait. Because we made a pact, Leo and I, brothers to the bone, no matter what. And I'm starting to think that thing in the woods is going to make me prove it.